Masilka, pledge allegiance.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do you have our Spanish interpretation? Not tonight? Okay.
All of our translators called in sick tonight. So if anybody needs Spanish translation, we have Ms. Trujillo who can help us out. So if anybody would like Spanish translation, Ms. Trujillo is in the very back of the room. There she is, raising her hand. Okay? All right, we apologize for that, the lack of our amazing translation team, but they're sick.
They're sick. So are headsets available, or will they not be available if we don't have the translation tonight? Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you, Ms. Trujillo, for sticking in there. So announcement of the closed session, item, make sure that I'm on the right item here. Item B7, the board voted in closed session to appoint Bradley Brock as principal of La Cumbre Junior High effective July 1st, and the vote was unanimous. So we'd like to welcome Mr. Brock. Okay. Now we'll have the superintendent's report.
And so Mr. Brock will make his way to Santa Barbara. He is coming to us from Los Angeles. He's currently working at a middle school in Los Angeles Unified School District. So we look forward to welcoming him. The board will get to meet and hear from him on March 12th. And we will send out communication to the staff tonight about that decision. There were 25 people on the panel. So in a way, this new interview process is like the beginning of the relationship of whoever's in a role with the stakeholders that they serve. And it was a really encouraging process for both sides, I think the staff and for Mr. Brock. So I will comment that we have kicked off our hiring season. We are going to be bringing recommendations to you, school board, every school board meeting across all layers, classified, teachers, and then our leaders and administrators. I do want to share that we had our, was this our third public forum for the School Safety Task Force? It was the third one, and the topic was specifically school safety. And we had a panel up there kicked off by Kelly Moore, who's in the back. I think the intersection of you approving our 18 safety plans tonight, and I would say the big progress that we have made as a school district. People have been complimentary about the changes and improvements. The standard response protocol, it works. I mean, we are hearing evidence of thank you, how this was handled. And then we had other topics, and so people got to divide up into small groups, and that good work just continues. So I want to commend Dr. Wagenik and the team for continuing to move that work along. And tonight, you get to approve all of the safety plans. And we will have a faster way to do all 18 of those, okay?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Masioka. So next we'll have the student board report. Ms. Carey?
Good evening, President Sims-Moten and members of the board and Superintendent, Dr. Wagenik, Dr. Ramirez. I'm going to have Jake and Alex make their way up here to the podium from San Marcos. And just as a reminder for the board and for staff, but also for the public's sake, this is our third student board report in our new mode of student board reports. We've heard already from students representing Dos Pueblos High School, Santa Barbara High School, and we look forward to our fourth student board report on a new date, actually because of a schedule conflict, so that will be April 23rd. But I just want to commend in advance Jake and Alex for their leadership. I'm going to turn over to them in just a minute, but just a reminder for all that these are presentations that began with the seeds that were sown in October as a result of the Student Voice Board, the special session of the board meeting, and we just look forward to seeing what's transpired in the intervening months. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi. So our identified area of need was through our Royal Time program. And Royal Time is an intervention program at San Marcos for students that have either a D or F. And it's a 30-minute period of time where they can go into their class and just do anything to improve their grade. So, let's see. So we wanted to use this time to make an electronic method for the administrators to connect with their students and create resources online. And also, this was an opportunity to share our concerns with about Royal Time with the staff and increase awareness about becoming a mentor, because there are mentors that are involved in this program. We are both mentors for the AP World History class, and we wanted to find a way that we can use NEO to put different resources and other stuff like that for every class, and also a system of communication that for the administration and for students. So our statement of desired outcome was that teachers would respond to staff or respond to shared thoughts from students, more mentors would sign up, more teachers would use more resources in NEO, and there would be a system established for students. And we did do this through an app on our iPad, so all students can connect with the administration and share any of their thoughts or concerns. So at our December faculty meeting, I went and talked to a bunch of the teachers about our concerns with Royal Time. And there was a mentor training where we got about 20 new mentors in our program. And there's also a training that all the teachers can attend about NEO and how to use it properly for Royal Time. And lastly, the administration followed the necessary steps to make a parent square available to students. So students found value in going through this process, and we enjoyed the process, felt listened to, and the administration was very responsive. So a few of our next steps will be monitoring the responses for by assigning consequences for ditching Royal Time. So I'm creating more so that more students are able to go and get their grades up. And we're also going to re-invite teachers to attend a new training on how to use the NEO resource. And we're going to try and require new training for the use of NEO to different teachers during Royal Time. And we're also going to review different models of successful programs like Royal Time at other schools to see how we can improve our program. And lastly, we're going to challenge every teacher to find at least one student mentor to reach out to them and try and bring them into our program. And that's all. Thank you.
Just so I add something here, I feel that the most important is to get more mentors, because when there's students and there's only one or two mentors for a group of 5 or 6 students, it gets very overwhelming. So the most important thing is to try to get more students involved in the Royal Time program.
Thank you.
Thank you. So don't leave.
Questions? Yes. Are there any questions?
Yes. Board members, any questions? Dr. Reed?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to commend you on your comprehensive approach and how you framed it and how you were able to achieve your goals. So I just felt it was really powerful. Having been involved in that first meeting, it's really cool to see where you've taken it. So looking forward to learning how it progresses. Thank you.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I have to say that Royal Time, we just heard a presentation from another high school recently, and they're envious of Royal Time. So it is something special at your school, and I appreciate the effort of trying to make it as effective as possible. I just had a question about mentorship, because I think it's wonderful that you both are mentors. How many would you say there are, or do you have a sense of that?
There are about 100 right now, give
wow.
or take.
So when you say you want to increase more, do you have a goal or sort of an expectation of how many more you can increase?
I'm not sure, because right now we just transitioned to our second semester, so it's kind of difficult to add in new mentors during the semester. So hopefully next year we can start a more effective plan in getting more mentors to be involved in our program.
For like a number, maybe like 150 would be a solid
Sure.
number to see
Yeah, 50%.
notable steps.
And why? What about mentoring? What made you decide to mentor, and what do you like about it?
Well, we've both taken the class and we've done well in the class, so it's just about like sharing what we've done and our successes with other students. And you do receive community service hours, so that's an additional benefit.
Oh, that's good. And are there other incentives like that you're discussing? I think that came up in our discussion in the October meeting.
Yeah, we're going to try and implement more benefits to encourage more students and try and just make it more like more aware on campus, because I feel like a lot of students just don't know about it.
Sure.
So just kind of putting it out there a little bit more will be helpful.
And then for me personally, it was just that I wasn't using the time like effectively, and I realized that I could get community service. So if teachers would target students more accurately and pick out students personally, and that if they realize that they're intelligent and capable and they're not using the time to help themselves or others, that they could help or encourage those students to become mentors.
Excellent. And on the, my last question is about the information on the technology and what are kind of the feedback that students are providing teachers through NEO and.
Well, we haven't. A lot of the teachers have not signed up for the NEO class, so that's why we want to kind of get teachers to get more involved in those NEO classes, so that students have a resource through their Rural Time NEO class.
Great. Well, good luck to you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Ms. Ford?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm quite impressed that this was the topic that you chose. There are so many things that we think about, and I know that high school students think about. So thank you so much. This has tremendous potential, and you're actually just sort of peeling back that onion of the fact that it could be so much better. So I'm very proud of you, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And I just had a clarifying question, so I agree with all and echo the comments, so thank you for being here and moving forth. It was so enlightening in those conversations that we had with the students and the board, so I really appreciate that and look forward for that happening more. But can you tell me what NEO is? Does it stand for anything? Maybe I'm the only one who don't know. But I
It's
need to
just
know.
an online resource where everyone can view their grades and stuff like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one with regards to assigning consequence for ditching rural time. Is there a reason why people don't want to go? Or,
It's right before lunch period, so a lot of students are encouraged to go off campus or try and do other things and extend their lunch period to make it an hour instead of 30 minutes. So a lot of students are not showing up to class or skipping that period of time for other reasons.
So how are you addressing that?
So I believe we're going to mark students, and if they're absent or tardy more than 4 or 5 times, they're going to be asked to go to Saturday school. So I'm sure that'll get a lot of students in their rural time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're
Any additional comments? Ms. Munoz?
I think it's a great idea to engage the teachers more also, and then to see about, students getting that leadership role just by being a mentor. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next is board comments and correspondence. Board? Any comments? Or Dr. Reed?
Just to reiterate, we're going to have coffee with the board at Dos Pueblos this Thursday, February 28th, from 5:30 to 6:30. And Ms. Sims-Moten, President Ms. Sims-Moten, and myself will be there. And we look forward to visiting with parents and learning about questions and concerns, and also hearing the positive things that they enjoy about Dos Pueblos. So we're looking forward to that.
Any additional board correspondence? Ms. Ford?
I just wanted to publicly thank all of you who extended cards and flowers and offers to help me. Today marks 3 weeks since my knee replacement surgery, and it's meant a lot to me to have so much support from Santa Barbara Unified and the entire community so early in my tenure as a board member. So thank you.
Okay, yes. So, next, do we have any public comments? Do we have public comment speakers slips on the end there? Yeah, okay.
Okay, we have 2 public comment speakers. The first will be Caroline Abate, followed by Denise Adams.
Thank you for allowing me to speak with you. I'm speaking in opposition to the use of the Just Communities Central Coast programs in our public high schools. This program contains ideas of white people, wealthy people, and even Christians as privileged and continuing systems of oppression against poor people, other religions, and people of color. The only endpoint of ideas like these is anger, hostility, and conflict. In 2018, the Santa Barbara Mission and the statue of Father Junipero Serra were vandalized in an ugly hate crime, consistent with someone who had been wrongfully taught that the church and white people are the oppressors of poor people of color. Even more disturbing, however, is what occurred during the City College Board of Trustees meeting on January 24th. During that meeting, a woman speaking during public comment to reinstate the Pledge of Allegiance is verbally assaulted by angry, hostile, and defiant students. Most striking of all is the total indifference of the students to the emotional distress their actions are causing the speaker. They persist in stomping their feet, defying repeated requests to remain silent, while continually interrupting with taunts and derogatory remarks. They watch as the speaker becomes more and more distressed, such that by the end of her 4-minute presentation, a woman who had calmly begun her public comment appears stressed, frustrated, voice shaking, and barely able to finish her last sentence. The behavior of those students demonstrates an appalling lack of empathy for the feelings of another person. Everyone should stop and ask themselves, is this the kind of character we want to grow in our students? Because that is exactly what the reality shows we have done. At one time, each of those students was an innocent, smiling, fun-loving little elementary school kid. Since that time, what ideas have been put into their minds to cause them to behave in a way that is so unhealthy and undignified for them, for their future, for our community, and for the future of our country?
30 seconds.
If someone is taught that they are the victim of an oppressor, of course they are going to hate that person and want to respond with the use of bullying, fear, and intimidation. Please stop your support of the harmful Just Communities program, because these ideas are doing our students a terrible disservice and causing damage that cannot be undone. Thank you, and may everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Denise Adams.
Good evening. My name is Denise Adams, a community member since 1980. As the last speaker addressed, faireducation.org has raised issues for the community about what is happening in our K through 14 school district. Members of the community are not pleased. The disruption that is occurring goes beyond students. It apparently is led and driven by faculty, trustees, and the relationships of people serving in public office that are less than transparent. I would like to encourage all of you to make your relationships in the business community, the nonprofit world, transparent. I would like to suggest that the board also disclose to the public your criteria for hiring new staff people, principals, as you did today with item number 6 or 7 in your closed session. What are your criteria for hiring? The public would really sincerely like to know, and as the people footing the bill, we feel that we deserve to know who and how you hire on an objective basis. We have now going beyond our public schools. You may have noticed we have driven national media attention to what's going on in Santa Barbara. That attention will continue. It will start to spotlight the people who are in the positions of authority running our school districts and how business is conducted locally. Last night, some of you may have seen on Fox News, one of our presentations, the incident of the Pledge of Allegiance at City College captured major media attention because that particular event was driven by faculty at Santa Barbara City College. They have no standards of accountability. They have no standards of personal conduct. They're representing the schools. The hecklers who were threatening people who came to give public comment were faculty on the payroll, one of them your former trustee right here. So this has caused and raised issues that it's time to look at everyone's background who is serving in public office. I did testify today at City Council that because of the implications onto the general community at large, we would like the City Council to start to meet with you and give you additional oversight
30 seconds.
and assistance. I see, thank you, 26 seconds, thank you very much. And we have also asked that the teen council get more involved, as also the elected student leaders at your 7 secondary schools. I think they have a lot to input, and decisions are being made that affect more than just the people in this room. So we'd like to see greater participation and outreach with the community. And again, thank you all for your service. Thank you.
All right, so next we'll move to our consent agenda. Are there any items that the board members would like to pull? Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I just, number 6. And it's quick.
So, okay. So, you want to go ahead and ask that question if there's no other items that anybody wants to pull?
Right, I'm not actually asking a question, I just wanted to acknowledge that this evaluative process is going to take place with our dyslexia program, but I also wanted to acknowledge the support that we are receiving from Santa Barbara Education Foundation and the funding that they are providing for us to be able to do this comprehensive evaluation is really appreciated by the district. And I know that they've been working closely with the district to ensure that we have this rollout successfully for this program to support our students with dyslexia. So I just wanted to highlight that and acknowledge that to the public, that we are thankful for their contribution to this process.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Any other comments or questions? Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes. So we move next to our action agenda. The first case is the Board of Action of Student Transfer, case number.
Yes, I move to approve the board action on student transfer case number 2018191-05.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, item number 2, board action on student discipline.
Yes, in the case of 2018119-19, I move to approve the recommendation for expulsion with enforcement suspended 1 semester, which ends January 2019.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. News, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Board of Action on Student Discipline.
Yes, in the case of 2018119-24, I move to approve the recommendation of a stipulated agreement expulsion with enforcement suspended 2 semesters, which ends January 2020.
A second?
I second.
Ms. Munoz, all in favor?
Aye.
Board action on petition for readmission of an expelled student.
Yes, in the case of 201718-30, I move to approve action on petition for readmission of an expelled student.
Do I hear a second? Who was the second? It's Ms. Ford? Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next action, approval of resolution 201819-33, the Black History Month resolution. I will certainly make that motion. I do have a comment. I want to appreciate the staff who brought this brought it forward and looked at research so that we would have it in time. The only comment I would like to make is that it comes a little earlier in the month so that we're able to enjoy whatever activities that are going on to celebrate Black History Month. But I'm glad it's here, and we'll make sure that it's in the early part of the month next year. So I move approval of the resolution 201819-33. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Next, approval of provisional intern permit. Dr. Vecchio?
Good evening, board members, and welcome back, Ms. Ford.
Thank you.
Tonight I have a situation where we have a substitute on a long-term 30-day permit, and a 30-day permit on a long-term sub position at Dos Pueblos in biology. And we do need an approval on a provisional internship permit that then will allow, action by you will allow the CTC to actually approve that and allow him to teach beyond 30 days. The good news is this particular teacher has a degree in molecular cell and developmental biology, so we should be in good shape.
So moved.
Ms. Ford, do I hear a second?
Second.
Dr. Reed, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Dr. Vecchio. Discussion and adoption of the low-performing students block grant proposal. Dr. Ramirez?
Good evening, board. Ms. Sims-Moten, Ms. Ford, glad to have you back. The item before you describes a preliminary plan to utilize funds as described in the board memo. These were funds that were allocated by the state and were described in this block grant for low-performing students. These are students that do not fall under the unduplicated pupil count and also do not qualify for special education services, as well as failing to meet standards according to the state testing, CASP, and in either math and or in English language arts. So in total, the students that meet this criteria in the district is 137 students across all grade levels. So in the memo, I'll start there. In the memo, the first part just simply provides you with background information pertaining to the block grant and the amount. The amount is $665,000 over the course of 3 years. The plan is there needed to be some discussion and a discussion on its alignment to LCAP. I felt that the goal in our LCAP that establishes the clearest alignment is our goal 3, preparing students for life learning and work in the 21st century. And in the table that is described, that is affixed to this, there is a description of the three different initiatives to augment. Now, these are already initiatives that are well underway, some of them for multiple years, but there is a description of ways in which to augment services to these students. Now, one important characteristic, because I read through quite a bit of the statute, quite a bit of the description of how this block grant is to be used. There is quite a bit of discretion, but specifically it calls for either direct services or services to improve the conditions for this group of students. So because they extend across multiple grade spans, the description here, the narrative, does provide for that through 3 main initiatives or main aims that are captured in our LCAP. Professional learning, specifically called out, was Professional Learning Week and additional summer opportunities. And I'll briefly go into those in just a moment. Extended summer learning, and then development of Tier 2 systems of academic support. So I'd like to just start with the first one, provide more or less a high-level view, and then, of course, turn it over to the board for additional questions and commentary. So in the first description, indicating Professional Learning Week, that's become a staple. I've been in the district now for 5 years, and Professional Learning Week has been something that has been a part of the district culture now for many years before that. And that happens annually right after school lets out effectively. And I did provide in the narrative a catalog, our most recent catalog of 2018, that provides for you an overview. Each year we've tried to become more focused, more intentional, and recognizing that teachers, you know, the way to, one of the ways to avoid an impact over the course of the work year or the school year is to work with staff to try to extend, if you will, opportunities where it's not part of the traditional school year and where teachers would be met with having to be away from students, because that just, it creates a lot of challenges. So in addition to that, we have continued every year to provide additional opportunities across elementary and secondary for collaboration and professional learning opportunities with specific teacher groups in mind, or certificated staff, because it extends beyond just the teaching staff. The second component speaks about extended summer learning. We, over the last few years, have used a number of different sources of funding to be able to carry out, albeit limited programming in the summer months. But it's our attempt to extend the school year to provide additional supports for students. And most recently, the last few years, we have now allocated an ongoing source through Title I funding. And that extends to elementaries, to junior highs, and to high schools as well. So this would be an effort to augment that and to provide the kind of programming that would target primarily at the secondary. I know it's very much based on the core four: English, language arts, math, science, and social studies. In the elementary, depending on the grade level and the school focus, it's more site-based. So there is everything from onboarding of kindergarten students all the way through students who we know need additional intervention over the summer months. And then finally, development of Tier 2 systems of academic support. That is an area that we could really stand to just bolster and be more intentional about. And what that means is, what happens when students don't learn? What happens when students don't master a concept the first time through? How do we reiterate, you know, some skills, and in this case, in the realm of literacy more specifically, to be able to do what we need to do to improve their ability to just improve their fluency or their reading comprehension, because we know that that has an impact on their performance, particularly as content becomes more complex and more layered. So just wanted to provide the board that overview. Again, to reiterate, it's a preliminary plan that may evolve based on, and I did articulate at least a few items that may change or modify that plan, including an annual professional learning needs assessment, as well as the LCAP process itself and where we might be able to see some adjustments. But we can firmly make a commitment to revisit this with the board at not only as part of the LCAP process, but in another board report or installment in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. We do have one public speaker.
Yes, we have one public speaker for this agenda item, Denise Adams.
Thank you again. I feel obligated to address this topic because several of you on the school board are new. This is an old topic for those of you who have been around for a long time. Starting in 1980, I became very involved with the achievement gap in Santa Barbara. Michael Caston, who was superintendent, followed by Debbie Flores. We're going back to the 1980s, 39 years ago. The issue is parent education and navigating the system, how to network it. I live exactly 7/10 of a mile between two schools. I live exactly between your Cleveland Elementary and Cold Spring School. Cleveland Elementary, the performance rate is 13% have achieved standards. That means 87% of the kids don't have an opportunity to be successful. They're not stupid kids because I have taken them.
30
Close
seconds.
it.
All right, thank you. Board discussion on this item? Any board comments? Ms. Ford?
Dr. Ramirez, can you tell me a little bit about, I see it says 75K, 75K, 75K. How does that break down? When I looked at the grant, it looks to me like it's about, well, it's more than $2,000 a student each of the 3 years. So what does 75K mean? And how will it actually track back to increased achievement?
So the challenge with this is that if we're talking about direct services, I think that that's better articulated in the second piece, where we can target those students for specific support. If we're looking at professional learning and bolstering, I would couch that under improving conditions. As the speaker did indicate, our children, I will speak for the elementary schools. By and large, most of the elementary schools have a very high percentage of students living in poverty that are low income, that do have certainly the desire, certainly the talent, but that require very specialized and high level of training for our teachers. That is a shift. We have teachers that have been teachers for a long period of time and that have been highly trained, and that need just additional support to make the kind of shifts that the standards call for, that just conditions on the ground call for. And then we have every year a new crop of teachers that are new to the profession, that are new to our district. The ability to onboard them, the ability to train them, comes with a trade-off. And that is that we have limitations when it comes to the work calendar. We have limitations when it comes to their available time. So to speak specifically to what was allocated, that is an allocation that would encompass a teacher's rate of pay for that week or for the number of days that they're involved, as well as to pay for facilitators, although increasingly we have relied on our own, whether it's teachers, administrators in certain instances. We have a lot of talented individuals working outside of the immediate classroom. So again, this is a preliminary plan intended to address, if you just take a look at the catalog, for example, there are specific offerings that deal with how to differentiate for different audiences. And those are the kinds of opportunities that we're seeking to provide, because in this case, we don't know why 137 students are not performing. Each one of them would be something different. What we do know is that they fail to meet, according to CASP, the standard for ELA or for math. So we know that there are numeracy issues, and we know that there are likely to be fluency comprehension issues. But of course, how those manifest for a third grader is going to be expressly different than for 8th or 11th. So The numbers that you see there I will readily admit, are preliminary, and I would love an opportunity to work through the next coming months to provide you more clarity. But generally speaking, that's what that would call out. It was teacher salaries and pay for certificated staff, because again, it's not just teachers, as well as for any facilitation that might be included.
Ms. Ford?
I also wonder if you'd be willing to consider strengthening the goal itself. It just seems somewhat vague to me. And it's really, in my career, it was always kind of hard to judge whether I'd met a goal if I made it very vague. And so that goes back to my question about tracking back. So you have this professional development that teachers are paid to attend. You've thought very carefully about the content of the special development. So it would only make sense, I think, to challenge ourselves to come up with some very intense kind of goals that we could go back and use as metrics.
I completely agree with you, Ms. Ford. In fact, this is actually, it's my mistake, because it's a bit misleading in this sense, that this is just incorporates, it just calls out an LCAP goal, which in the LCAP plan is much more robust, with many more descriptive components around the actions that fall under that goal, as well as a list of metrics that we have tracked year over year to help us monitor our growth. But I will make sure to make that also more explicit as we write the LCAP as well.
Ms. Capps?
Thank you. And along the lines of understanding more about the professional learning, and I appreciate the differentiation that this is about improving the conditions. I'm not asking you to name schools, but I imagine that these 138 students are somewhat concentrated in a few schools. I just wondered if those teachers are getting, is this, because as far as I understand, these professional learning days are for the district-wide. Can there be additional supports for those who teach the students we're trying to reach?
So what's interesting about this, and we have to run our own calculation, there are 137 students, but because of CDE's calculation, I can only tell you the number. We have to run our own calculation to identify exactly who those 137 are. However, what I can tell you is that they do span multiple grade levels. They're not necessarily concentrated in any one grade level or any one school. They very well could be, but we have to run our own calculation to make sure we have a better sense of where they're where they're located and who they are. Now, as far as the targeted support for those teachers, we're also hitting a bit of a moving mark, because at the secondary, you're talking about at least 6 teachers. At the elementary, you're talking about a teacher that may be their teacher this year, but won't be their teacher next. So those are the kinds of just adjustments that we need to make in calculations to try to provide the biggest impact with these funds.
Thank you, and I appreciate that restraint that you need to do it in that way. But I do, it does sort of to address, as you did, the speaker's point of differentiation between schools. I think it's sort of a bigger question of, what extra support can schools that have more of a percentage of students who aren't meeting state standards, what extra supports can we give them, and can this grant be applied to those specific teachers? Schools, rather.
We will certainly look at that and bring that back as feedback.
Okay.
Any other questions? Dr. Reed?
Yeah, only to say that I know this has been something we've reflected on before in terms of a goal of having all of our schools achieve at the same level. And so I appreciate the work that's gone into getting this grant and for framing it, and also for giving us more information linked to the LCAP. So I'm hopeful that perhaps, are there other matching grants out there that we can be seeking now that we have this one, to take us maybe to be able to meet more needs that we have in terms of student achievement?
So this was not a grant that we applied for. This is a grant that was generated at the state level, and based on our data, our student data we qualified for. So this was not something that we initiated or prompted, or that was a call out to districts statewide. Whether this will become renewable or not, I don't have any clear indication. But it was, one of the terms is that it's a 3-year grant where, we just want to be really thoughtful. And some of the guidance has been a bit rolling from about December on through. And so we just want to make sure that, we've gone back and forth as a department and trying to really be strategic with initiatives that we care to augment. So in terms of matching grants, I don't know that there are any specific to this because we did not initiate this grant or this grant proposal.
Thank you.
Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I definitely would be interested in more information about it, and appreciate the information you're providing us about, closing the achievement gap for students across the board. My fellow board members are real motivated about seeing that improve, and good to know that it's for 3 years too, to carry over.
And I just have a couple questions. So the 137, that's 137, as you said, across the schools. So would that be the only 137 concentrated for this support over the 3 years, or will a new crop come in as we get everybody more proficient?
That's a question that I would have to come back to and try to respond because that's the group of students that generated this grant allocation. They may or may not be the same group that is with us next year or even in the year after. So I will certainly have to do some more research on that.
Okay, and then my second question is, how are students referred to the extended summer learning? Are they identified?
So this is where, if Ms. Carey wants to provide any input from the secondary perspective. But from the elementary, it's really based on a lot of our local data. In grades in grades 2 and under, there are not standardized testing. So we don't have that as a metric to be able to provide a look at how students are performing based on that tool. We have other internal tools and local measures that allow us to have a sense of how students are progressing academically. In grades 3 through 6, certainly CASP, and then by the time you get to 6th grade, you have now multiple years of CASP performance. That would be a pattern and would set a trend. And that's the way in which schools start to identify, what students or what groups of students to cluster. It's always a really big challenge because our funds are not, they're not in abundance. And so really decisions and partnerships have emerged that help bring more resources or more opportunities to our schools. This year we've discussed what our programming might look like for extended learning in the elementary space. But that is something that becomes a challenge also in terms of pooling our resources because transportation becomes a factor at that point as well. And so we're stuck between a number of different factors with limited resources to try to really target students based on their needs. I can also tell you that there have been other partners and even donors that have stepped into this space and have helped us provide whether it's a bridge from 6th to 7th or even site funds that schools allocate for the purposes of onboarding, for example, their incoming transitional kindergarten students to give them kind of a leg up, if you will, in how they come into the school year. So there's different expressions of that, and we're constantly trying to learn from each other and improve. But it's always a challenge with limited resources.
And I would just have a final comment to that. When we have, the opportunity that came before us, it's just it's one time. And so how are we thinking long-term in terms of sustaining that so that we get this bump and then it goes back because we're not able to sustain it? So I don't know if that's part of the planning, the future planning, that we keep that in mind.
That was at least part of the logic behind putting resources based on things that have already been initiated or actions that have already been in place. Because we want to provide some measure of stability, and 3 years is quite a bit of time to be able to support if done, better each time. But certainly, finding stability with grant funding or one-time funds will always be a challenge, because they are either intended to serve as a start to programming and a launch, or, and it's just very difficult to say 3 years out, if this proves successful, there's no renewal of those funds potentially. So we do have to consider that. So we want to put it into building capacity, certainly, but also creating models that then might find their way to be funded through our own district funds.
Are there any additional comments? Ms. Ford? Yes.
You may not have this number, but I'd love to know it eventually, which is of the $75K per year that's allocated from this block grant for professional learning, what percentage of is that of how much professional learning week costs?
I will probably have to get back to you on the specifics.
You don't happen to know how much we spend on that each year?
On Professional Learning Week, it's probably in excess of $200,000.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, if I could just reiterate the need for more metrics here. I just think, you've given us this number, 137. It's quite stunning. And I just think I've been a part of a lot of efforts where if you have a goal like that, if you've been given this amount of money, let's try to get that number to, I'm not going to put words into your field, but I just think it's such a thing to try to rally around. Let's try to get that number to 100. Let's try to, bring that number down. And this just is sort of lacking that. And I think if with more sharpness, I can just only imagine as a teacher, and probably this is happening. I know that every day teachers are trying to get that number down to 0. I understand that. So it's not a question of sort of motivation. It's really just in the approach of this new set of money and attaching like a really strong metric to it, especially because it is 3 years. It's a number like 137, and let's try to get that down.
Certainly, we'll look at how to position ourselves to track how those students fare over the next coming years. Admittedly, some may exit our schools, but we want to be able to track that, not just symbolically, as you alluded to, but in a real way, just to add the student perspective or the student look beyond just numbers. And I'm going to be able to talk to Mr. Rouse, who I'm sure can come up with some way of identifying over time how we can better track these kids.
Mr. Matsuoka?
Yeah, I'm going to ask some questions both directions on this, because the level of, let's say, program evaluation that I hear what the board's asking, it makes total sense. The state has not identified those students to us, correct? That's what I heard as part of opening comments.
We would have to, in the spreadsheet that was provided, and it's put for public release, they wouldn't have been identified that because they wouldn't be able to disclose those names. So what they did disclose is the formula and the factors for how they arrived at the calculation. So we will either talk to CDE to get the names from them, or run our own metrics to be able to ensure that we can come within close range of that 137 and know who they are.
Okay, so we have, under our direct supervision, about 13,700 students. So I'm asking questions because I hear what you're asking, but I want to make sure that the ask is realistic. We are talking about 1% of our students that we serve. If you're looking for a research vetted process to track the expenditures of these funds in the outcome of 1% of our students, I mean, that's a really narrow part of our school district, student body. And those students are scattered across 17 schools. And so, yeah, I just wanted to do a bit of a reality check that you're not looking for, or are you looking for, or you okay with us finding a different way to evaluate this, because if you want to see the impact on these 137 kids, that's a very narrow group of kids as we train a pretty broad set of teachers who are supporting these kids all over our schools. Do you understand the tension of the, I see some head nods, I see some questions, I see some pauses. Yes, Ms. Ford?
Well, yeah, I understand that 137 isn't a large number, but that is not the number of kids that are failing.
Correct. Correct.
And that's sort of the key, is that I mean, for me, I believe that Dr. Ramirez is describing in all of the 3 strategies things that we're doing for kids who are failing.
Okay.
So I'm looking at it as a much bigger issue, and I really want us to address it across the board. These 137 are just the kids who are not caught up in any of the other special funding sources that the state allows for. So really, it's a small number, but on the other hand, the strategies are the big strategies.
Okay, so I appreciate that. So if I can reflect back now, I think what we could act on is these 137 kids are generating, actually, it's a lot of money. I mean, and I don't think we need to spend, it was a lot of money per year. I think what I'm seeking direction from, what will be the impact of these investments on kids who are not meeting standards? All kids. Okay, all right, that's really helpful clarity for us, because now we know what to design to measure. Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure we weren't setting up Dr. Ramirez for an impossible problem to solve. Okay.
No additional comments? Do I have a motion to adoption of the low-performing student block grant proposal?
So moved.
Dr. Reed, do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Capps, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay, so now we're moving to approval of the safety plans, and what's that strategy to, how are we going to do that fast?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Matsuoka, Ms. Sims-Moten, and rest of the board. So we have a number of, all of our school safety plans and our Santa Barbara Unified School District Safety Plan here to approve. And what I'm going to, first of all, thank you for engaging us in the robust conversation and review at the last board meeting. Ms. Ford, I'm sorry you missed it, but I hope that if you have any questions, we'll address those now that came out of your opportunities to review. And then I'll make my proposal of how we review, or how you approve them.
Dr. Reed?
So I just had a question, because I didn't see necessarily reference to preschools and safety plans with preschools. We have what, Adams, Cleveland, Franklin,
Right.
Harding, McKinley in the early years in Santa Barbara High.
So Mr. Moore is here, but I think I can field this one. In fact, I know I can. And that is that the assumption we operate under is that whoever the principal of the school is of that campus itself, and if there are multiple schools housed on the campus, then that site's safety plan applies to all. And so as far as the preschools go, their safety plans are rolled into, for instance, Franklin. Okay, so they work with them, and that's a best practice. I would say the exception to that would be that our 2 charter schools that are on our school campuses, Goleta Valley and Franklin, also create their own school safety plans as part of the requirement from the state of California. However, in the event of an emergency, there are contingencies built into that process.
Ms. Capps?
No, I just wanted to, before we move forward, I really appreciated the conversation last meeting and the fact that all the principals were here. And and Kelly Moore. It was such a good discussion, and so I think that we're going to move forward on these. I just wouldn't want anybody who's just tuning in to think that we're just kind of glossing through these, because we did spend quite a bit of time, and more importantly, your staff and the teams and the principals and the parents and everybody who's served on those committees spent a lot of time. It's so clear, and this process is such an improvement over the past and really reflects on and coincides with the safety task force and the comprehensive effort that has been put forward on safety plans in general and school safety overall. So just expressing my gratitude and excitement for moving forward.
Ms. Ford?
I just want to say that even though I wasn't at the meeting, I did watch the tape, and so I have a pretty good understanding, I think, of all of the issues and the work that went into this, so I think I'll be able to vote.
I assumed that you did, so. All right, so if there aren't any other questions, my proposal would be that we name them one by one, and we'll call them out, and then you can make a vote en masse. And if there is one that you would like to exclude, we should know that ahead of time.
Are there any plans you'd like to exclude before we go zooming fast through all the work that's come before us, as Ms. Capps stated earlier? Okay, let's roll.
So I would like to ask the board to approve the Adams Elementary School Safety Plan, the Cleveland Elementary School Safety Plan, the Franklin Elementary School Safety Plan, the Harding University Partnership School Safety Plan, the McKinley Elementary School Safety Plan, the Monroe Elementary School Safety Plan, the Roosevelt Elementary School Safety Plan, the Santa Barbara Community Academy School Safety Plan, Washington Elementary School Safety Plan, Goleta Valley Junior High School Safety Plan, La Colina Junior High School Safety Plan, La Cumbre Junior High School Safety Plan, Santa Barbara Junior High School Safety Plan, Dos Pueblos High School Safety Plan, La Cuesta Continuation High School Safety Plan, San Marcos High School Safety Plan, Santa Barbara High School Safety Plan, and the Santa Barbara Unified School District Safety Plan.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Ms. Capps? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Dr. Reed? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Moore. Okay, traditionally, board, we do take a break here between our action items and report, but it's with the will of the board. We want to continue moving on. We're good. We'll continue moving on. Okay, so next we'll have the California School Dashboard Local Indicator Report, State Priority 3, Area 3, Parent Involvement. Dr. Ramirez and Ms. Carrick.
Good evening, Board. Mr. Rouse, could you go to just the annual planning alignment? Just want to continue to reference this document. It's a way to, just for our department and us as a district office, to keep ourselves really on task, if you will, and to provide clarity, as much kind of big picture clarity to the board around the different components around accountability. Most of these hover around the dashboard and LCAP, but there are some other components that are equally of importance, including the SBSA plan implementation, which is fully underway now with principals. Just earlier today, we had a number of principals meet us here to consult on their school plans. So this indicator report is part of a component that we need to report back on the dashboard, and this one deals with specifically state priority number 3, which is parent involvement.
So we need, Mr. Russ, can you go to the slide deck, please?
All right. So In this report, this one just provides, again, a high-level view of the LCAP development process. And starting with the dashboard it was in December of 2017 when that dashboard was released. Since then, there's been a reimagining of that dashboard. So already we're having to kind of reorient ourselves. Much of the information and the metrics remains the same, but the way it's displayed is dramatically different. Parent involvement is one of those areas that we've known has always been a cornerstone of school life. And volunteerism involving parents has always been a way of just interfacing and working and collaborating with parents. What has changed in the last few years upon the arrival of LCAP is that now it's more defined in some ways as an expectation, but not so much in terms of how it's to be undertaken. So years ago, when I came to the district as the director of EL and parent engagement, a good way of grounding the work fell under taking a document like the state's parent engagement framework and trying to overlay that with some of our existing programming, as well as identified needs. And so what resulted is that we have now evolved that system to get quite a bit of parent input. So we have actually now established the California Healthy Kids Survey as a really ongoing way of evaluating. And so the report that you see here is really a call out to some of those results. So just a high-level view here, and you'll see more in the report. Parent perceptions of schools allowing input and welcoming contributions remain high and steady of just over 90%. And then perceptions of actively seeking parent input in decision-making continues to hover in the mid-60s, which is down from the mid-70s 2 and 3 years ago. That's an area that we're trying to, just better understand. Promoting parental participation in programs, again, indication that strong parental participation in general school events and structures designed to elicit parent input. So I will name a couple of those examples. The fact that the survey has now been an annual survey, I think, goes a long way to signaling to parents and families that their input is welcome. We've created other tools for that purpose as well. But in that process, we've also increased other engagement strategies, whether it's programming or outreach to specific groups that maybe in the past had not been quite as strong. A symbol of that would be our ELAC, and as a district, our DLAC. We have now gone forward with training from a district office, some of those ELAC, not only the ELAC officers, but also principals alongside. So I'd like to actually, Mr. Rickman, can you help out with the other table? I take that back. I think that's all there is for this one. It's in the next report. So again, high-level view. What we see is that we're becoming more effective in getting parents of all backgrounds to participate in programs and to communicate opportunities. We are providing more language access for parents of ELs, and we establish a recursive communication system between DLAC and the board. This is something that also came in play about 5 years ago, where DLAC for several years was making recommendations to the board, but there wasn't necessarily a feedback loop to how those recommendations were faring or how the board was receiving them. And so we have established now a cycle by which that is monitored pretty actively. And so in this arena, we are just looking for how those cultural items begin to result or do result in improved student outcomes, recognizing that it's not a one-to-one correlation. So I will go ahead and stop there and field any questions before moving into the school climate report.
Dr. Reed?
Boy, that was good. So I just have a question regarding the perceptions of actively seeking parent input in decision-making remains in the mid-high 60s, down from the mid-70s 2 and 3 years ago. So I'm curious, for such a 10% drop, what sort of analysis has gone into understanding why this is happening, and what sort of work is being done or framing to bring that rise back up to where it should be, or even higher, actually. But within 2 or 3 years, I'm just curious what led to that, and what are you doing to change that pattern?
So let's take a look at the data, and I'll begin to share some thoughts. Mr. Rouse, can you go back to the other memo? Can you go further down? All right. So this first table shows the trends in parent perceptions of school decision making. It was the number that was articulated there. If you look at the numbers on the bottom, you'll see the aggregates. But where you will see some measure of distinction is amongst the students, the demographic breakdowns. The question that you're asking about is in the next one. So this one is the percent of parents who respond that they strongly agree or agree that this school actively seeks the input of parents before making important decisions. Now, this is where we do see a greater discrepancy between demographic groups. So when we look at the aggregate number, if you look at, for example, in 15-16, that number was 74%. And if you track that number across demographic fields, you see that some demographic groups have held steady, fluctuating 3 to 5%. Where there's been a drop-off have been in the number of white parent respondents. So that number has dropped from 67 to 59, which creates a change in the aggregate. Now, in this information, it would be extremely difficult, and I would say even irresponsible, for me to render a judgment. But this is something that we certainly look at by way of the information that's coming from schools and balancing that with other points of information. The challenge with us is that we don't have the means by which, or the capability to tease this out to the nth degree. It would really require, once again, a much more robust and distinguishing research evaluation in order to do that. But it is an important trend to look out for. So when we look at, for example, the parents of our English learners, 91% in 15-16, 18-19, 86%. If we're looking at our Latinx population, 86% to 80%, a decrease. But where the greatest decrease happens to lie is within our white families. So, and in foster parents, for example, if you look at that number, that's a small number of parents, but when the feedback states 55%, it's certainly something to call out. Our African American families, 83% to 68%. Now, there can be more volatility in the numbers because it's a small group. So if if there are shifts in opinion or in perceptions, then it's going to operate more dramatically in the numbers. but it's still an important piece to consider. So how are we reaching out to those audiences, and in what ways, and what has shifted? Those are all really important questions for us to ask. But this data unto itself won't answer, in my opinion, those questions that I think you're seeking. They're the very questions that we ourselves are asking.
Can I just ask the question? I'm sorry, Ms. Ford. So the difference between 15-16 and 18-19, there seems to pretty much decline across the groups. Did the questions change? Did the number of students decline? What happened? I mean, you may not be able to answer that, but.
In fact, the number of participants increased. So if you look at the number in 2015-16, it's 2,500. By 18-19, it's 4,100. So what we could be seeing is a more accurate representation of the group. Now, is that all of our parents or in families? No, it's not. But it is a statistically significant representation across demographic groups.
Ms. Ford?
Thank you. Then the percentage of the parents is interesting to me, but without knowing how many there were, I just can't make much sense of it. Or I guess I would say that there could be a very interesting conversation when we knew how many Asian, Black, Latinx, white parents, et cetera, had actually responded of the 4,100.
I have some information, if I may interject, about that. So from this last administration, what we have is percentage rates of participation. So of respondents, approximately 40% identified as Latinx, approximately 40% identified as white, and 40% identified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. So those are that gives you a little bit of some of, kind of how to weigh some of those numbers. Just for points of comparison, and to Dr. Ramirez's point about, when you have larger versus smaller sample size, you sometimes see more variability year over year. We have 3% of respondents identified as Asian, 7% identified as parents of students in ELD, receiving ELD services, 1% identified as African American. So it's just another layer that isn't visible in this table, but that we do take into consideration as a data point while we make sense of what these numbers are telling us.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
And can I just ask, in terms of the economically disadvantaged, are there duplication of numbers?
Correct.
Okay.
So you can, even though they're all just listed there in the left-hand column, they're not mutually exclusive categories.
Okay. Dr. Reed?
So I just had a question. So I know there's been a definite robust work that the district has done relational to supporting English learners and families, and with DLAC and ELAC. And I'm wondering, have you heard any responses from parents, maybe from the PTSA, specifically white parents that have saying they're feeling that they're not engaging, or that they're making any comments that way? I'm just curious. That they're not, maybe, are there other venues for them to engage?
Sure. Anecdotally, we've heard commentary across all of our schools for a host of different reasons. There are part of our initial discussions a few years ago around trying to capture this idea of parent involvement is that it's not an easy marker to determine. A parent, you could argue, could be incredibly involved and not volunteer 1 hour to the school, not be on a committee. But certainly, I think there are a number of parents for whom that would apply. Parents who have professions, work, whatever kind of commitments that take incredible responsibility for the education of their children and aren't necessarily visible at school. So even the idea of trying to triangulate and create quantitative measures for how to define involvement is a challenge. And then how to tease that out from engagement. So if a parent shows up to back to school night, does that equate to somebody who serves multiple years on a school site council or on a PTA, PTO? So there's just we're looking at a very much a moving target. Now, to your question about opinions from different family groups, absolutely. We have received a number of opinions, and some have been positive, some have been less so. Some have called for increases in programming that fits different parent audiences. Much of our programming is pretty long-term. It requires a significant time commitment, and issues of language access have certainly come up, which stretches already very finite resources and creates just additional layers to work through. But what I can tell you is, anecdotally, from what I've seen firsthand from our DLAC parents and from many other parents, is that much of the programming that we've been able to provide at all layers of the system have been very useful and helpful for parents to understand how to navigate the system, how to have greater visibility to the system, how to then create outroads and inroads to other audiences, whether it's PTA, school site council, or other groups, boosters, the list goes on and on. And those, I think, are also opportunities to bring different perspectives to those groups and good ways of ensuring that parents have a better opportunity to engage meaningfully once they're there. Because I can also tell you that many parents do feel a sense of intimidation in coming into, and I'm talking about parents across the board, coming in not knowing, school governance or the back end workings of a school system, which do have a measure of bureaucracy to them. So our programming has been building, and we've been trying to vary it, while simultaneously trying to target the audiences that are called out for in our LCAP. So it's been a very delicate balance, and we're still evolving in that sense.
Is this something that different school sites could involve parents in terms of having a questionnaire or even a commentary for them to provide their concerns? That I know when we were at Monroe, for example, for the Coffee with the Board, a parent specifically spoke to the fact that she felt that her child wasn't getting the support that she thought other students of color were getting, and that she wanted to make sure that her child would have that opportunity. So it's important, I guess, I'm bringing up the idea that are these parents provided a venue to talk or speak about their concerns relational to what they feel their child needs? I guess it's dependent on each site, right? So is there a comprehensive approach across sites, or is it just really dependent on each site?
I'm afraid that there hasn't been a comprehensive approach the way that you're identifying. I don't know that there is a set-aside venue for that conversation to take place. But let me make a commentary on that point. When we talk about issues of equity, we have to maintain that not everybody has a similar starting point. For some parents, the ability to even set up an appointment or communicate with their principal is a big step. To communicate with a board member, big step. To communicate with district officials, big step. And for other parents, that may be second nature. That may be just what they, socially, some of the social norms that are availed to them for different reasons. So what we're trying to do is build programming where parents know what pathways exist for them in order to avail themselves of the right information, avail themselves of the right pathways to seek clarification, correction, resolution, whatever the case might be. So, and I know that brings with it a certain tension, because it's very difficult with, again, limited resources to be able to create spaces. I think part of the conversation has been that we have now offered up, and we're offering up some opportunities to create those spaces through Just Communities. We just had a very important conversation there at Monroe, which was very well attended, and that put some of these issues on the table on how to reconcile the different frames from which we operate.
Additional comments, board members? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ramirez.
I would just say, just continue doing what you're doing and continuing. I would just say that obviously there's gaps there that need to be looked at and opportunities. These are just opportunities to continue to ensure that we have the engagement of our parents, because that's crucial to our students' achievements.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the board's concern. I know it's been of great concern of how to engage all families, all students, and certainly appreciate the line of questioning that the board put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to F2, the California School Board Dashboard Local Indicator Report, school year 2018-19, the State Priority Area 6, School Climate, Student Sense of Safety, and School Connectedness. Dr. Ramirez, Ms. Carey, and Dr. Wagner.
Dr. Ramirez handed me the clicker, so I'm on.
All right.
No, I'm happy to bring to you the local indicator report for Priority Area 6, which is school climate. I want to say that school connectedness is one of the indicators here, and I think it's really important. I wanted to make sure that the board understood how the California Healthy Kids Survey actually comes to that measure and looks at it. So the questions that are used are these. I feel close to people at this school. I am happy to be at this school. I feel like I'm a part of this school. The teachers at this school treat students fairly, and I feel safe in my school. And then the other piece of this metric is the sense of safety, and it is, rather than questions, it's a collection of measures that look at school. Do students perceive school as very safe or safe? Have students experienced any harassment or bullying? Have they had rumors or lies spread about them? Have they been in a physical fight, and have they seen a weapon on campus? And so these two are very, very, very intertwined. I go to the last one. So we always see, in terms of a high sense of safety, we always see elementary students as having higher measures than students in secondary. Part of this is developmental. Part of this is because it's 5th and 6th graders who respond to these, so they've been in the same school, primarily with the same teachers. They feel very much at home 5, 6, 7 years into a place of being. Now, if you're a 7th grader or an 8th grader, where you're only there for 2 years, but also it's the fact that the adolescent brain starts to feel less connected to other people during this time period, but it's also that there are actually things that are happening that are making them feel less connected and less safe. So we did decrease from our 2015-16 baseline. I want to point out, and I look forward to the day when we're not talking about the 2017-2018 school year, but I talked with Dr. Guillermo Juan about the outcomes, and we both agreed that even though students are not any less safe than they were, they feel that way. And that's what we talked about at the last meeting is, in order for people to truly be safe, they have to feel safe. I do think we're at a point as adults where I really want us to shift away from talking about students being unsafe, because I think they're listening to us. And I think they might be internalizing that a little bit. And so, because of the changes that we've made and our renewed commitment to safety, I think it's time to start telling them that they are safe and that we're going to keep them safe. I think that'll increase their sense of connectedness. I think it will also make them feel safer. And I think I'm going to use the word love. We don't talk about that a lot, but I think that kids feeling loved at school can go a long ways in terms of helping us see an increase in these metrics. I don't take any comfort in the fact that 21% of elementary students don't feel safe, 5th and 6th graders, or that almost half of our secondary students don't feel a high sense of safety. It's not enough to feel a moderate sense of safety. I want that to be a much, much higher number. So we move on. What's that? Yeah. So with that, we can go to questions that the board has.
Board, any questions? Ms. Capps?
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. I appreciate your point of messaging safety and all of the wonderful gains that have been made and the systems that are now in place and have been in place and people that are dedicated towards this. And I'm just curious, I'm not trying to add to this, but when I'm reading these results, I want to pull aside, 10 of these students who don't feel safe and ask them why. I mean, and I know you do that all the time because you have such interaction with students, but I'm just kind of curious if there's what you might think if you had students in sort of if there was a focus group on top of this wide data set, what would you imagine would be said?
Well, actually, one of the groups that feels the most unsafe is students who live in who are homeless, or so we are going to be having a talking in class where it's specifically students who are under-resourced in terms of their housing, and so we'll have an opportunity to hear from them. Mm-hmm. I think, yes, I could talk about what I hear from students all the time. I think relationships with each other and relationships with their teachers is the key piece. And I'll be bringing to the board in probably about 6 weeks our plan for launching social emotional learning district-wide. And the number one thing we have to focus on is the relationships between adults and students before we can even do students and students. So I'll be bringing that to you, and I think at that time we have students that we've invited into the process. I know I didn't answer your question,
Sure.
but it's so layered in. A lot of it isn't anything we have control over. So students bring to school a sense of being unsafe. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty in the state of California. We're the third our third highest rate of poverty for all groups in the state of California, and our childhood poverty is the highest. And it's not in Santa Maria, it's in Santa Barbara.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, while we see this in terms of the connectedness and safety, some of that is brought to our schools. And I think for some students, especially in high school, it's like that we see who are chronically absent and truant from class. It's not that they don't go to school, because they'll say, well, Dr. Wagner, I go to school, I just don't go to class. And they go to school because their friends are there. because they are safe, there's food. So it's just such a complex piece that we're talking about. But I truly believe this work in social emotional learning is the next frontier that's going to move these numbers into a better space. And I do have to say, our numbers aren't that far off from the state of California. And so, but that still doesn't make it okay. We just want to do better.
Dr. Reed?
Thank you. I really want to acknowledge your comment about the connection between the students and the teachers. And I think the high school students that came today and spoke about increasing that within their, how many teachers can we bring into this process and they're asking for that, and they want that. So I think that's crucial and actually for elementary and secondary. But I think we see it in secondary that they're not in a class long enough. They're traveling from place to place. It's hard to have that connection in their larger classes, class sizes. The other thing I just want to acknowledge that I truly commend you for bringing forward the social emotional framework that you're discussing right now, because I think that is crucial, and to do something like that across the board is going to be monumental, I think, in terms of moving forward and changing these numbers. So I want to just acknowledge that.
And I thank you, and I want to acknowledge that that work is really about the work that Dr. Ramirez was talking about earlier when we were discussing the block grant, when we were talking about closing the achievement gap, because that is our primary role, is to make sure that students read, write, think critically. And so that's what all of this work is about, and we're doing it in collaboration together.
And I would just add, I had that same question about, the question was about how are we connecting our social emotional work with this and moving this in this particular survey. But I also think about, I was just at a church service on Sunday, so members out here, and we had a couple high schoolers, I think they were freshmen, and they were talking about, I've been marked absent and all sorts of different things that was going on, and they're like, okay, why are you absent, marked absent, right? So it's really the conversation too much to what you said, is connecting with them through conversation, asking the questions at their level, because it turned out, we're just a little late to class. So a little late to class, or do you go, how do you then connect with your teacher? So that's an important piece about connecting, even opportunities like that. We would just happen to be at an after church service, and we had some teenagers there, and I don't know how the subject came about, but it was that connection then, and they felt like we were asking them questions and putting them on the spot, but in the end, they were really glad that we asked about that. So sometimes it's just asking to what you're saying, Ms. Capps earlier, it's about just asking the questions, how are you doing? And just in their normal day conversation, there's so much that we can learn in that. And so there's missed opportunities, I think, sometimes as adults, when we could just ask those questions and that we can engage them in. So I just also want to commend us moving forward and making sure it's district-wide. This is also part of the early learning. We're looking at our 2- and 3-year-olds who are, they can't articulate it, but it's in their behavior if they're not feeling safe or whatever the cases might be. So it's down that far too. So we continue to work that so that when we get to this point, there's a feeling of safe. There's a system that protects them and engages them as well.
I will say that along those lines, we have pockets of things happening. Like Dr. Simmons at Santa Barbara High has been working with AHA to train the 9th grade teachers on social emotional learning, and out at Dos Pueblos, where we're seeing some really amazing student services related data coming out, they have implemented Check In and Connect, which is assigning or linking students with trusted adults, trusted adults that they choose, that they identify. And so all these things we are seeing that those things are having an impact.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, this is a follow-on, and it's a little, maybe a little bit creative, but I was thinking, as I took this survey as a parent, it is a moment where you stop and think. And I know that this is anonymous, but it did make me wonder, is there a way, if you mark down, I don't feel safe, then what? In a perfect world, there'd be sort of a button like you could press, like if you wanted help, or because you are captivating this student's attention. Just kind of food for thought, because again, it's so hard to have that kind of interaction, and yet this survey provides one of many. I know there's many interventions, but I think just in a perfect world, we'd be able to kind of dive in at the point that student is actually checking, that's answering that question. No, I don't feel safe, and then what?
And I think it's not on that survey, but that's where the Stop It app has helped, because it's not just about reporting things they see, but some students are starting to use it for that. And so I don't know that through West Ed we can, or Cal Schools, we can make that change to that document, but we can work on making sure students know.
Sure, or maybe just
available.
even in the presentation of it when it's sent out, if there's any, again, that's not for me to manage, but just the communication aspect of, if any of these questions you want to talk further, contact your teacher or something, just as a prompt.
Additional comments? Ms. Munoz?
Yes, I was going to say that, in terms of the connectedness and, and safety, here in Santa Barbara, I work with, many of the families with housing problems, stable housing and not knowing where they're going to live next, and the impact on them as students, where they're, distracted by, just basic, where am I going to be tomorrow, along with language barriers and immigration issues, traveling to and from school, and parents that commute or parents that lose a job and such. And so as we, I think it's wonderful to have that where it could be expressed at the school and recognized, and help with, address the connectedness so that they're able to speak of that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Wagner. Were you going to say something, Mr. Matsuoka?
There's a project that was launched by a couple of our teachers, Laura Wooster-Dorfman. She's our TOSA in charge of restorative approaches, and Helen Murdoch, one of our TOSAs in social studies. And they were sensing that their colleagues, the teacher workforce, really needed a space to talk about their social, emotional needs. So they put out a survey. They asked me if I would buy some books, and I said sure. And I was going back in time. They had 116 people sign up, and they launched it last summer. Now, it's diminished in numbers, but what that told us is our adults need to be taken care of. And, we sit here as the leaders of a district. We have kids in crisis. We have schools with, the achievement gap is just 4 decades worth. But boy, our teachers are under tremendous pressure, and they're dealing with, I think, things that have arrived in classrooms that weren't there certainly 40 years ago, 30 years ago. We are wondering about how do we support the adults in our system who have become caregivers of the youth of our community. So we want them to teach intellectual capacity, but now we ask them to help raise kids. And I just share that, just listening to this. Connectedness, parent engagement, it all ties together. But I tell you, our staff, how do we as the board and cabinet take care of our workforce? Because when they feel cared for, they'll take care of our kids. And wow, there's just not enough time and money to go around, but just want the board to be mindful. We're starting to wonder about how to support the adults from a social, emotional learning perspective.
Final comments? Okay, that's our final report of the evening. Thank you. What a way to conclude about caring and providing love and safety. So we didn't have any items that we need to return back for discussion. Coming events? Any coming events? So we have a coffee with the board that's coming up on February 28th. We're at Dos Pueblos. 5:30, Dr. Reed and myself are there. I think there's also some read-in opportunities for Dr. Seuss that are coming up. So yes.
Very
On
exciting.
Friday.
Oh, yeah, Friday.
Yes.
Very exciting.
So that's coming up as well. Okay, I know I had fun with my little Dr. Seuss hat last year. It was kind of
Which
hard
I
to read with those
borrowed.
gloves, but yeah. Okay, are there any future agenda items? I know there's a list somewhere. I keep asking that list. Dr. Reed, you weren't here last time, so we got to come up with that list of what we've already said we want to have on the agenda.
Yeah, and
So-
I think that list it's in cyberspace. We have to bring it and we actually have to print it out. But it is on the, I know that Superintendent Matsuoka mentioned that he was going to highlight some of those. And so I know that you guys will pull some forward that have been sitting on there for a while.
Yes, and then we'll have some that's coming up that's been requested, so we'll see those on March 12th.
And a reminder that we have our first special board policy board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. So we're going to queue up. Don't be alarmed at the number. We're just going to put on a healthy amount. If we get through 2/3 of them, great. We're just, trying to catch up on the backlog.
Okay. And then we have on March 30th our special board retreat. Looking forward to that. And then our next meeting is April 2nd.
Board policy, just so I
March
have-
5th.
March 5th, so that
March
should be
5th.
listed, correct?
It should be, but it's just not on here.
Great.
Yeah.
So thank you for that reminder. Carol worked very hard in getting us together, so let's not miss that meeting. So we'll send out a reminder just to make sure. Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Ooh, at 8:20.
Wow.
So moved. There we go. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Cabinet, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. That ends this board meeting.